Today we have a very special guest joining us for stock analysis and economic analysis. The name is Nikhil Vora, but all through my reporting career, if I looked up to a researcher, even for reporting skills, it was Nikhil Vora. The amount of sixth sense he could bring to bear on stock numbers was absolutely mind-boggling. Not surprising, he has called his new venture Sixth Sense Ventures. Nikhil Vora, good morning and thank you very much for joining us in our studio.
Morning and pleasure to be here again.
Well, you know, this is obviously once in a many generations. I think it's an unprecedented event. You can't even call it once in a century kind of thing, because for such a complex economy with largest population, so much of currency usage, this has never been, attempted. How would you trace the impact of demonetization on the economy? 1 quarter pain, 2 quarter pain, 1 year pain?
You know, Lata, and I think it's important, and I'm sure you guys have done enough and more in the last few days. In any changeover that one's looking at, that changeover has to be drastic and dramatic for it to be impactful. It requires no saying that there is pain for almost everyone. While it supposedly brings about a level playing field for the common guy, the fact is that the common guy was actually benefiting the most because of this black economy, or the so-called unaccounted economy in the market. So there will be pain in the next maybe couple of quarters and more. But I think it's we also have this entire thing about, you didn't develop the electric bulb by making the candles better. You couldn't have done that. So you have to create a level playing field. This is a market where, and as economies grow, it has to become cashless. It's an irony that in Indian context, we've lived with this over the last few decades, and no one's really battled an eyelid, because frankly, everyone's been participating in it. You, me, I think everyone has in some form of unaccounted money, not necessarily legal money. So I think there is pain, there is this transitionary impact which happens, but we've seen that in Indian context, transitionary impacts are also something which Indian consumers are very adept to change. It's happened before, not to the magnitude as what we are at today. So look at how DMAT really took off, and the transition was frankly very smooth. Look at how airline ticketing really started to shape up. Now, one may call it to be a mid-premier phenomena and not really a mass phenomena, but I think this will also go. I know of more than enough instances of how businesses are down by 90% and so on, possibly more, and I don't think that will change in the next month or so. But the fact is that people crib if they have to stand in a line, in a queue for a movie ticket. They've not done it for such a huge impact in their own life, and these are daily wagers and so on. So I think it's a brilliant impact. It's showing up on the conviction of most ordinary citizens of the country, and at some stage I think you have to give in to something which is for the larger good, for which I think it's very welcome.
Nikhil, good morning. That clearly, I mean, your conviction was always there. You were one of the first investors in Paytm. That's what we've been told. But are there enough, companies in the industry, in the economy to play this demonetization? That's something that our viewers would want to know from you.
So I think, the narrow objective is obviously what you were looking at, which is what businesses and stocks to buy into and stuff. I think what will be important is to really look at really kick-ass businesses in a big-ass market and a smart-ass product. I think if you really get these three things right, you've got your businesses right. In the Indian context, again, my sense is that most large players have their own inability to change course. Because you're large, you're successful, by default, you cannot change course. Yeah? So you have to look at challengers who can actually unsettle the leaders. And I think there will be a lot of challenges which will emerge from this space. So like you rightly said, Paytm is obviously one play, and obviously I'm biased, I'm an investor and so on. But the fact is that, leadership role changes every decade. We've seen that historic, and I don't think we're going to see any changeover as we move forward. Maybe that decade will actually shorten further as we move forward. I think you will get businesses which will become a lot more relevant. I could name a few. A lot of them will be in the private space as we speak right now. But I surely think that if one wants to call the demise of leaders, you couldn't get a better time than this right now. I think leadership role, the values for the leaders that we've historically paid, I think that will all change over the period of time. In the next couple of years, maybe sooner, you will have a lot of new age businesses which will be a lot more relevant for the next 5 to 10 years, which will evolve. I think the most critical aspect will be KYC, which is really know your customer in this case. So, if companies really know their customers well enough, they are the businesses which will be a lot more relevant over a period.
So you were really ahead of the curve with Paytm. I mean, what a bullseye that was. Now Paytm's recording, what, 5 million transactions a day because of this demonetization. If you had to pick, the next big thing, the next big theme, maybe not in the listed space, even in the unlisted market, what do you see as the trend?
Sonia, I think there's one clear direction that I see. Sorry. I think if we look at the last decade in India, there are actually only 4 brands which have evolved in India. And that's the reality. And that's ironic.
Which is?
So you could call Paperboat as a brand which has evolved. A Fog Dio, which is again one of my investee companies. You could call Go as another one. And Patanjali. I frankly can't think of the 5th brand which has evolved in India. Everything else which has evolved is a platform. So Paytm is a platform, so is a Flipkart and so on. But all other brands that we think today are platforms and not really product brands. So I think it's going to be a lot more difficult to identify spaces which will create brands unless they are disruptors in their own spaces, right? So if there are large spaces and companies and players are adapt to changing course of those businesses, I think then they'll be able to create brands. What spaces to really look at? I think clearly anything to do with mobile payments, obviously, one of it which we already named, Paytm and stuff. I think those could be very relevant businesses as you move. Dairy companies, I think the big theme also as we evolve is unorganized to organized, regional to national, and unbranded to branded, right? So with GST also coming in, hopefully coming in now. I think you'll start to see a lot of those spaces evolve. So maybe dairy companies which have historically been very regional strongholds, I think that could become very large. So I just think that, incrementally investors will need to be a lot more careful than what historically we've been. I think it's going to be a challenge to really get winners out of the 5,000 odd listed businesses that we have today.
Okay, actually, I want to go back to the first theme that you said. We have managed dematerialization of shares brilliantly. We managed, prior digitization, but though they were high-end, as you said, airline ticketing. How do you expect this? I mean, why Paytm? Paytm could be destabilized by the unified payment interface, by the MPIN. Are you seeing that level of MPIN usage, mobile-to-mobile messaging of money from a taxi driver to an auto, to become the basis of payment in society? And if that were to happen, what would you buy, if at all, in the listed stock or in any space?
So I think, Lata, like we just said, I think the changes are very drastic. You have to really invest in businesses which are up for disruption and who understand disruption in their own businesses to change course. My gut, and I've said this earlier also, that every businesses have life cycle. NBFCs had a life cycle in 90s. They died, almost died. There are possibly 4 or 5 of them which are really relevant today, because fundamentally they were intermediary in a space where the raw material was capital, which fundamentally meant that only banks should survive. And I've said this before, IDFC was also lucky to be in that space at some point in time. They had to convert into a bank, which is what they've done. I think banks today, not necessarily in the next year or so, but over a period of time, will be in a struggling spot, right? So payment gateways become relevant. Who knows what's the next stage? But I think today, at least in the next 4 or 5 years, it seems to be a very visible business to be betting ourselves on. I just think that, it's important that we somewhere demystify this entire premium that we've historically paid for large-scale businesses, because I think large-scale businesses by its own nature are not as fleet-footed as they used to be earlier. Earlier, the biggest strength that they had was they had their distribution power, and that ensured that no other player could actually compete with them. Today, distribution means nothing. I think there are multiple methods of distribution which is available, and which will mean that challengers will now have a lot more capability than historic to compete.
In fact, I wanted to ask you about this same conversation that we had about 3 years ago on the alcohol space. I remember you used to track United Spirits very closely, and you did mention that the United Spirits profits will double over the next 3 years.
Yep.
But since then, Diageo has come into the fray. Things have not really panned out as well. So many regulatory hurdles.
Yep.
How did you read into all of that?
I completely agree. I think we've made a mess out of what our numbers should have been, and we've never been great at predicting near-term numbers. But I think that, specifically in case of Diageo, I think their integration really didn't happen at all. So beyond the regulatory and state issues that we keep grappling with, I think they couldn't really get their hands together between Diageo India and the United Spirits operation. Second is, I think they made just the biggest mess of a diligence that one can ever think of. There was enough grey shades which was known to almost everyone in this country. I'm surprised someone who bought just the disproportionate stake into that business didn't realize what's behind it. I think it was up in the air for everyone to realize it. Maybe we gave them a better sense of judgment that they've done all that to take it forward. I just still refuse to believe that a business where you continue to hold 60% market share in this country and you can't be profitable. I think it's just insane. It's just not practical. Pernod Ricard has a much smaller stake in India.
So you write off that story?
No, you don't write off. Obviously, I think businesses, large businesses or relevant global businesses have their own learning curves, and they eventually get it right.
Okay, Nikhil, I can't let you go. We're running out of time. But do tell us how much more of a downside you see in the market. And, all the big brands you're talking about are not in the listed space, Patanjali, Paperboat, Go. So, in the listed space, how would you participate in the eventual upturn, which should come after this cleansing?
So, Lata, what I can say for sure is that, if I just look at something which has been very close to me, which is the consumer space, I can tell you for sure that someone like GSK is almost shut down their Horlicks plant. Someone like Reckitt is losing 10 crore per day today. Someone like Levers or Imami, obviously, which are seasonal plays, are losing out on their best season, winter. And someone like Levers, obviously, is struggling with the large packs that they have and so on. So I think in the entire consumer businesses today, this quarter is almost a write-off, if one really looks at that. As far as markets are concerned, my sense and gut also is that investors adjust themselves, so you will also have the same quality of investors to come in to bet for a larger good. So, there will be players who are willing to bet for the next couple of years and more, who will start to participate a lot more actively. And the near-term guys really move out and withdraw themselves, which is perfectly how market behavior should be. Listed space, I think precisely why we've set up a venture fund. I think there's just so much value in private, because early stage entrepreneurs are the one who will challenge the leaders, and they are almost always in private domain. So I think we really focus there.
Okay, very quick question. Since you track media as well, the media is also changing. A lot of digital consumption. Even our channel, for example, now gets consumed on Facebook and Twitter a lot more. Any particular niches in that area, listed or unlisted?
So I've personally always liked PVR amongst all the players which are there. I've struggled with your own business, Network 18 group, for a lot of reasons beyond content. I think you've always been brilliant at content, quite poor in corporate governance. Sorry for this, but yeah. I think PVR is very interesting. They don't control the content, but they control the distribution, and I think that's very, very powerful. And it's a distribution which very rarely can be replicated. So I would continue to remain fairly positive there.
We don't comment on our own stocks, so that's your comment. Thank you very much, Nikhil Vora. It was a pleasure speaking with you after such a long gap.
Pleasure.